Doom. It's such a classic, no more introduction is needed. In August 2004, the third iteration of the franchise was released. Soon after, a small and passionate team of fans would band together to work on what was arguably one of the most popular Doom 3 mods. The goal? To remake the original Doom in the Doom 3 engine.
Yeah, I saw the advert and he posted up saying that he'd done E1M1, and I was like, actually that's a really good way to learn the engine, to make a level that's already got the blueprint's already there, obviously, from the previous game.
Professionally, no one was doing game dev. I think pretty much every one of us was working on this with the hopes of someday getting into the game development field.
At the time, after the mod came out, like everyone I knew who was into gaming knew about it and loved it.
I do feel like in some way it was part of an end of an era in modding.
There is an expectation out there. There are going to be expectations out there about what we are making on top of, this homage to this game that all of these people have played. Like, what are they going to make of this thing?
People wanted that style of gameplay because there's still such a big community that's vibrant around the old school like Doom.
I think classic Doom 3 is probably one of the prime examples of what an action horror shooter should be. I haven't played anything that's even touched it.
Bound together by a love for the game and driven by a shared vision, this is the story behind the making of classic Doom 3. Before we get too far, let's cover some basics. Technically, any change made to a game by fans or players is considered a mod. It could be in the form of new models, sound effects, music, textures, weapons, levels, etc. In the modding community, however, it's called a mod when multiple changes are integrated into a game. Modding is very accessible. Companies put millions of dollars and years of work into creating their games. By modding one of them, you don't need to code your own engine and build all of the assets. You get to play in their sandbox, and if you get good enough, the results look like $1 million. The barrier for entry is very low. id Software games have a rich history of community modding. Soon after Doom's release in December 1993, the first level editing program called the Doom Editing Utility was released on the internet. Suddenly, anyone with the patience to learn could create their own levels. The sheer number of mods that came out for Doom was staggering. In one of the mods, someone replaced enemies with characters from Beavis and Butthead, as well as some sounds with their laughs. There was a Barney mod that let you shoot up the famous purple dinosaur. It was 5 minutes of pure satisfaction for parents everywhere. Even the US Army made a mod for training soldiers. But while those caught headlines for their novelty, some truly great mods had been created by a fan base that was captivated by the magic of making their own worlds in this game they loved so much. id Software built Doom with modding in mind. They welcomed it. It was a part of their culture and what id Software co-founder John Carmack called the hacker ethic. In the 90s, modding exploded. Doom 1 and 2, Quake 1, 2, and 3 all had huge communities making ever-increasingly impressive mods. If you modded back then, chances are you got your start with one of those games. It was common for those with exceptional skills to land themselves a dream job in the gaming industry. In their prime, id Software released a new game about once a year, maybe two. They released a multitude of Commander Keen games as well as Wolfenstein 3D, which preceded the releases of the Doom and Quake games. When Quake 3 Arena was unleashed onto the world, everyone was too busy playing Deathmatch for a few years to realize that id Software was late. John Carmack, lead programmer and wizard, had announced Doom 3, a retelling of the original Doom, in June of 2000. 2001 came, 2 years after Quake 3 and still no Doom 3. In May of 2002, id showed off gameplay footage of the game at E3 running in their latest engine, id Tech 4. It was light years beyond anything anyone had ever seen before. Dynamic lighting, real-time shadows, bump mapping, it was simply unmatched. Doom 3 was the story of E3 that year. If this was what people were in for when the game finally arrived, I'm sure they wouldn't mind waiting another year. Or two. Yeah, id Software took 5 years to develop and release Doom 3. There were many factors that played a role in the long development. Fans were hungry though, and when the alpha version used at E3 2002 was leaked, some intrepid members of the modding community discovered that it had the level editor built in. They were able to get a head start on learning to use it, so when the game finally came out, they'd be able to start modding right away. All of this build up to the game's release caused the hype to climb to inexplicable heights. A week before its release in a world exclusive review, PC Gamer gave it a 94%. In the first paragraph, they called it mind-blowing. They compared the opening to that of Half-Life, saying, "Here's what you really spent those first 15 minutes doing, gawking." After a long 5-year wait, Doom 3 was finally here. The game was fairly well received, but even the most die-hard fans could find some flaws in it. The biggest one was how different it felt from the fast-paced shooters that were Doom 1 and 2. Sure, times had changed, and the gaming community had grown up a little since the early 90s. Developers were moving toward realism over arcade action. Lots of people loved the slower pace and horror aspect, but there were a growing number of fans who longed for the old-school style of gameplay. Andy Stanton, also known as Kazahana, was a typical university student. Quiet, understated, and never wanted fame or looked for the limelight. In fact, he chose not to do an on-camera interview for this documentary. He gave written answers to our questions instead. He lived in the UK, loved video games and metal music. He had dabbled in Quake level editing back in the day, but never did anything serious. When Doom 3 was released, it was inevitable that someone would remake the original Doom in the new game. Less than a month after Doom 3's release, Andy started doing just that and posted this thread on the Doom 3 World forums. Andy wanted to learn how to build levels in a modern game. He started by remaking the first level of Doom, known as Episode 1 Map 1, or E1M1 for short, and was looking for feedback. Remaking E1M1 helped him focus on learning the technicals of using the editor without worrying too much about layout and design. It also scratched the itch that so many fans had, to see that classic level in a modern game. The community reacted very positively to Andy's forum post. One user known as Zeus posted this comment: "What you should do is make a mod that includes all the original Doom maps, also put classic sounds, classic weapons, and music and call it Doom Mod. That would rock." A more prescient comment there never was. People wanted more, but there were two problems. First, Andy questioned the legality of a full remake. He had seen similar projects get shut down due to copyright violations and didn't want the same to happen to him. The second problem was, he was at university.
I started the project and made the conversions of maps E1M1, E1M2, and E1M7. Fairly early on, it became apparent that I couldn't dedicate enough time to the project.
Andy immediately started getting offers for help. Unfortunately, most of them lacked sufficient skills to be of much assistance. In early September, Blaster and Razorblader joined the team. Blaster was a level designer, and Razor was a texture artist and item modeler. He would start with remaking the shotgun as well as a chain gun and rocket launcher. Another community member who was also eager to learn how to design levels in Doom 3 was Gaz.
Hi, so I'm Gareth Ward. My screen name back then was just simply Gaz. I worked on the project, started off as like just doing some basic level design, and then quite rapidly took on responsibility for the project. So I was responsible for E1M4, E1M8 and E1M9 entirely pretty much, but towards the end we all kind of did bits and pieces to help the other, we all fed in to do bug testing, tweaks on various features and so on. So we all kind of helped each other towards the end.
Initially, the team had no idea how far they were going to take the project. They were just remaking some old levels and having fun learning. They were not the only group making mods for Doom 3, however. One mod, called Last Man Standing, sought to bring co-op to Doom 3. Others had posted screenshots of early builds of the original Doom as well, such as Doom Reborn. One person, going by the name Sin, posted these screenshots of his E1M1 remake. This particular remake was made using a utility that converted the old Doom maps to the Doom 3 format.
Other people just loading in the Doom mods and then trying to release the shareware version. And then you had classic Doom 3 where it was recognized that it was something special, it was something different, it wasn't complete rip of the old game.
Starting with Andy's E1M1, they tried to reimagine the classic levels how the designers at id Software would have made them if they had this technology in their hands in 1993. The layout was mostly the same, but they were attempting to bring a little bit of realism to the abstract designs. A lot of early discussions revolved around design philosophy. They wanted set pieces in the level to have purpose. Take, for instance, the slime room in E1M1. Andy wanted to stay true to the original, but built the level in a way that almost explained why things were the way they were. The team even solicited feedback from the fans regarding jumping, crouching, and even mouse look. The consensus was to put an option in the menu to disable these features if the player wanted. In the end, the team decided against the idea and simply designed the levels around the added abilities.
E1M4 was the level that I was assigned when I first joined the project before I became project lead. I looked at what was happening with E1M1. It was just a case of, well, how did Kazahana take E1M1 and make it work in a Doom 3 engine, but making it Doom 3, if that makes sense? When I was building the level, I had a screenshot of the auto map fully from E1M4 in the original game. I had the game running in the background in a small 640 by 480 window, and then obviously the editor. And I just alt-tab between these different resources and just put it together, really.
It was this attention to detail and respect for the game the team hoped the fans would see and appreciate. The time had come to show their progress, so Gaz prepared an alpha release version 0.2, uploaded it to d3files.com, posted it on doom3world.org, and then went to bed. The next morning when he saw the response that the mod had received, everything had changed forever.
There was a pivot point when we did that first release. You know, it's a major, when you do any kind of project like this, you do your first release and that's the thing that makes it become real. So it was like, yeah, probably get a few hundred downloads, whatever. You know, it's not going to be that popular, is it, right? And then I remember posting it up, and then the next day looking at it, it was like 10,000 downloads in one night. And that blew my mind, like, absolutely. People have downloaded and played this, and they like it? Okay, so then we started having a conversation about, well, how far do we want to go with this? Because originally we started it as a passion project just to learn how to use the tools and learn how the engine works.
Today, this will be like uploading a YouTube video and waking up to 50,000 views.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
The eyes of the community were on them. The team felt a responsibility to do it right. The alpha got more and more attention as word spread across the Doom 3 community. People started asking how much the team was going to make of the original game.
Let's do shareware and see how we get on. And then we did the first release, and then it got massively popular. Then we had around the same time, we had conversations about how far do we want to go with this? And then the first question was, well, obviously legalities are going to come into play here because shareware release is free to download for anyone to play through. So even though it's a grey area, because we don't have the, obviously you need to own Doom 3 to be able to play the mod, right? So I think it was a grey area, but we was okay with it because the shareware was free.
The goal was set. The team would concentrate on finishing the first episode of Doom only. The alpha may have gotten some attention, but the mod was by no means a finished product. In January 2005, they released a small 0.25 alpha to fix some bugs, but they still had 5 levels to complete. They also had all the music to record, weapons to implement, and sound effects and voice acting. This would be no small feat, especially considering they only had a few people on the team. The team was aiming to release version 1.0 by December that year to coincide with the anniversary of the release of the original Doom, but there was a lot to do. To break up the work, they decided to release a 0.5 version in June. It would include the first 5 levels, music for each, plus the theme song. There was an all-out push to get the 0.5 alpha release finished. The first 4 levels still needed refining. Gaz would rebuild E1M4 a couple of times before finally getting it right. Work on levels 5 through 9 needed to get started as well. Beta testers were brought on to help find as many bugs as possible, as well as check for weapon and gameplay balance. In March, Sonic Clang and Snoop Jedi joined the team.
My name is Brian Klein, and I go by Sonic Clang online. So originally I was brought on just to make the music, to remake the original MIDI music with real instruments. As the project moved further and further along, it became clear that I was going to have to do other things. So I think by about August of 2005, I had wrapped up the music, plus the theme song. And then I moved on to doing sound effects and voice acting for the intro and outro cinematics.
Yeah, so hi, I'm James Snoop Jedi Garrity. I was a member of the Classic Doom 3 team. I worked on the GUI, the main menu, and some other changes, the end screen, the end of levels, some miscellaneous things in the code, and just general bug hunting, things like that. There was this sort of continual process of like, let's make these maps just a little bit better. Like even the ones that were really, really, by the time I was aware of it, like E1M1 was very polished and like pretty much done when I first discovered Classic Doom 3, but there was still like improvements to be made, and you know, some of the stuff was just like little bugs, or like somebody would have an issue with the lighting or something, or maybe there was a little gap in the geometry that wasn't fully closed. I saw an opportunity there. There was some solicitation of like, hey, we need beta testers to like test these new versions of these maps and check things out, and I was more than willing to do that. So I got started that way, and then eventually there was some need for more members of the team to do things like the main menu in particular, and I stepped up and stepped right into that role, and the rest is history, I guess.
In May, the team brought on Guy Brave as a model skinner.
My full name is Shane Shriwartha, and the screen name that I went by back when we made Doom 3 Classic was Guy Brave. I did all the new meshes for the pickups, like, you know, the ammo and the shotgun shells and all that kind of stuff. And I did 1 or 2 of the first-person weapon models.
The team was doing everything they could to get the 0.5 release ready. To let the world know they were still alive and ready to generate hype, they released a teaser trailer made by Blaster. Behind the scenes, the team continued to refine every aspect of the mod.
There was a lot going on in that initial attempt at E1M4. I didn't realise at the time, and it sounds really silly now in hindsight, but there were certain materials or textures that were semi-transparent. So I was using these textures that looked solid in the game engine, but actually they weren't. And then when you went to compile it, I kept getting leaks and things and issues and all this. I didn't know why. I couldn't work out why, because in the editor it just said there was materials and they should be rendering properly, right? But I managed to bodge the map to work and not have leaks by adding extra brushes. I didn't really fix those leaks. I just kind of bodged it. Anyway, so that version of the map, it was kind of fixed, and that was what went into 0.2, the first release. So it was playable, did the job, suboptimal. I wasn't really happy with it though. We iterated on that version of the map and got feedback off the other members, as you do.
People talk sometimes about like, oh, like these game developers ship a bug. It's like no game ships without them. There's always going to be more stuff that you could do, you could fix. So you're just always trying to keep your eyes peeled for that sort of thing, just to at least be aware of it and then you'd figure out which one of those things you want to do, and then which ones you don't.
I don't think I ever found any bugs that other people didn't find before me. Like, I'd go to post a bug, and I went to go post them, and somebody already posted them, and I was like, yeah, I found it too. So I kind of felt like a failure as a beta tester because I wasn't doing anything, so I was just this uber fanboy that's foaming at the mouth for more Doom.
Beta testers were helping to find bugs and balance issues. On June 1st, they released the mod's theme song to keep the hype train going. This was the community's first glimpse of the work Sonic Clang had been doing. Incredibly, it was one of the top downloads on d3files.com that week. People were hungry for anything the team fed them. And then on June 10th, the wait for the 0.5 release was over. Finally, people were able to play levels 1 through 5 accompanied by the music blasting through their speakers. If the first alpha got them excited, this one sent the hype to the moons of Mars. News of the release spread like wildfire across the Doom 3 community. Later that month, EnterTheGame.com invited the Cdoom team to an interview. Welcome aboard the Hype Train Express. Next stop, version 1.0. The team would have been forgiven for taking a well-deserved break, but that's not what happened. Besides doing the interview and answering questions on their forums, it was full steam ahead. They had decided that they would like to have an intro cinematic for the mod. The original Doom had, story? It was right there in the README. The goal was to base the intro on the story, however thin it was. So the search was on. They needed an animator.
Name's Brian Henderson. I think on the Cdoom forums, I was just B. Henderson. Yeah, I was the cinematic designer and animator. Pretty much wrote and created the cinematics.
The intro video to classic Doom 3, when you go back and look at the other intro videos to actual AAA studio games at the time, like you could tell that it was a smaller studio / fan base doing it, but it was still on that professional level. And you even have the voice acting where it was significantly better than the original Resident Evil game. And then when they're talking about they're going to need another volunteer with a portal, and then the general or the commander that's speaking to the Marines, he expresses what happened, and you have the Marine in the background going, "This is bullshit," and it gets you because there's just that little bit of cheese in there. But it's also believable at the same time. And the intro video prefaces the game on what little story there actually was. And then the door opens, and then boom, you're in E1, M1.
Yeah, when I originally pitched the cinematic, I do recall a lot of the team members were like, "This is a lot of animation. Are you sure you could do this?" I was like, "Yeah, I could do it." They're like, "This is going to be a lot of custom animation." I was like, "Yeah, I know. I could do it." I just can't believe I did in a short amount of time. I basically had to know how everything fit together with the engine, like how all the definition files worked within the maps, and had to use a special script to actually export all the animations over to Doom 3 animation types using a script that someone on the Doom 3 forums had. It was really challenging just trying to figure out how it all fit together. Like, for instance, you had like a definition file that defined an animation that you put in place, and then at certain frames you told it what to do, like play this sound or trigger this entity that's within the map that's like a blood splatter. And then I also had to figure out how to get lip syncing to work, like with the characters. If you look at the cinematics, you notice the mouse moved perfectly with the sound.
Since then, attempts to establish contact with either moon base have been unsuccessful.
So initially, I tried just listening to the sound file a tenth of a second at a time and notating that, which was extremely time consuming. And then I found a program called Sappy Lip Sync that I could run the sound file through, and it would show the pronunciations. That sped it up quite a bit. I coded something in C++ that would convert all that over to something I could use as a reference within the animation files. Yeah, that part was pretty interesting. Really time consuming.
Fire! Fire on those rioting civilians! Kill them all! What are you doing, soldier? Are you disregarding a direct order?
You were sentenced to a lifetime of Mars military duty for disregarding direct orders and nearly beating your commanding officer to death. Soldier, you were lucky we didn't hang you.
I don't remember whose decision it was to cut out this sergeant section, but he said, this is just like a real movie. We're cutting stuff out, tightening it up. The script itself, I looked at the Doom README file and based it directly off that.
There was a README? I didn't know that.
I knew that they were probably aiming for like some kind of campy horror type stuff, kind of like Army of Darkness.
Well, Gaz and I were initially trying to go for something serious on the intro, but I think both of us quickly realized it was going to be a little campy and a little cheesy. There's one guy that I don't remember. He came over and I was frustrated. He wasn't taking the thing seriously at all, and for some reason I just went with it. I gave Brian Henderson the files of his recording. The guy's like, 1 volunteer coming up. Dum-dum-dum-dum-dum. And we kept that in there. It was like I had voice actors coming over and I was trying to like direct them. They weren't voice actors. They were just friends and family and one guy I knew at work. And we were definitely going for that serious tone. And like when I say, get the next volunteer or whatever, it was surprising when I first watched it, how it didn't really match what I saw in my head. Like I was trying to make fine art, film noir kind of thing.
I wanted the intro and ending to be like super serious, like mean and like dark and serious and moody, horror, that kind of thing. And then when I saw the intro and ending, when it came out after it had been created, I was like, it made me cringe.
People would be like, I don't know, it'd be cringeworthy, I think. So I think putting some humor into it, especially with the crude animations.
I let it sink in, and I went back to it again. It took a couple of weeks. A bit like listening to a new album for the first time, right? Got to the end of it, and I was like, and actually, I took it for I didn't see the comedy in it to begin with, and how to take it because of my mindset was so set in stone back then about my views of being really serious and whatnot. And it took me a couple of weeks for it to sink in and go like, yeah, actually, this is really funny and this is really cool. We're going to do this.
I didn't know a whole lot about animating at the time. I was still learning the ropes, so it wasn't the best, but it got the job done, especially in the short time frame we did this in. It was like 3 months or something crazy like that.
And I actually skipped forward and going through these YouTube videos again over the last couple of weeks, seeing the comments and things, and people going like, oh, this is so funny, this is amazing, all that kind of stuff. Because it's like slapstick or whatnot. I don't know, I can't remember some of the comments right now. Having it in there was like really good to see, having it in there. Because it's of its time as well and what you could do with the engine. It was so hard to animate stuff. On the ending sequence, there's a bit where he's walking across the bridge. He says something like, because it's just reading the text from the original game,
that was just me reading it, yeah.
It says something like, and he's washed up on the shores of hell. But the way it says it sounds like, oh, wow. And it's that tone of voice in there. It's like, oh, wow, he's landed up on the shores of hell. It's just like...
I probably could have done a slightly better job reading that.
Whenever I saw
now that you've beat the big badass, okay...
It kind of that little bit always made me crack up when I hear that.
I remember the intro cutscene being finished really late in the piece. I don't know if this is correct or not, but I remember it being like the last thing that went in.
Yeah, it was near the end of the development phase, like version 0.9 or something. So everything was pretty much done.
Whoever's left, if you can hear me, get the hell out of...
The original score was composed by Bobby Prince. Even though Bobby was limited by the technology of the time, he created a monumental soundtrack for the game. He had practice from doing multiple Commander Keen games, as well as Wolf 3D before Doom. The team wanted the soundtrack for the mod to be more realistic and not sound like MIDI. Much like how the team was reimagining the levels and making them less abstract, they wanted the music to be played on real instruments. They'd need to find a musician not only capable of achieving this goal, but one who was also into gaming enough to want to take on the project. In the early days, the team had a lot of discussions about the music. They talked about the possibility of having an open contest to find the right person, but that idea was overruled. Soon after releasing the 0.2 alpha, Sonic Clang commented on Gaz's Doom 3 world post.
When I first played the 0.2 alpha, when they put it out, Gaz had posted about that on doom3world.org, and there wasn't any music in the alpha, so I posted and said, let me know if you need a musician to remake the music. I would love to be a part of it. Gaz asked if I'd be interested in joining, but he didn't want to just say, welcome to the team. He had to sort of put me through a little bit of an audition process. He asked me to remake E1M1, at least a sample of it, and from there they would judge, if I was good enough to join the team. And thankfully, everyone listened to it and they liked it.
Once on the team, his brief was simple: recreate the original music with real instruments and make them as faithful to the original as possible. Remaking the Doom songs was a dream come true for Sonic. Back when he first played the game, the music was just as much a part of his love for the game as the gameplay itself. He had figured out some songs on the guitar as a teenager and even roped in a drummer to play with him.
I loaded up that game, and I remember my brother was in the next room, and I started playing it, and I heard this, and I yelled. I was like, Paul, you gotta get in here. This sounds like Metallica.
He would have 9 songs to record, plus a theme song. This was a big task for one person, especially since he made the decision to record real drums, something that's incredibly difficult to do when recording alone. He had also not mic'd and recorded drums in years. The music played a big role in classic Doom 3. If it was done badly, it would reflect poorly on the mod itself, but done well, it would help lift the already incredible levels the rest of the team had put together.
I remember distinctly being blown away when I first heard Brian's interpretation of the E1M1 track. I hadn't listened to it before playing the level through, and it hit me like a punch in the face, and it felt suddenly like the mod really meant business.
E1M1, you creamed it, you smashed it. Like that, I had always, and I've heard other people try to cover it, but we're all amateurs, at the time, like doing that kind of thing. And when it screams in, I was like, this is I wanted to jump on that project.
E1M1 is probably the most important song in the whole mod. It's got those extremely fast leads, and yeah, I had to kind of employ a couple of tricks. The leads were written on the keyboard, and trying to go from keyboard to guitar doesn't always work. I couldn't play any of them standard tuning, so I had to tune my guitar differently for each one of them to be able to actually play it. It took 8 solid hours just to record those leads, and the leads were actually the first thing that I recorded. Then I came back and recorded the drums and the guitars and the bass. I remember playing real bass for it, real bass guitar, but when I went to play the drums, I couldn't play them perfectly, and that song kind of required them to be perfect. I actually sampled my own kit. I sampled my kick drum and my snare and used the original MIDI from the drums to trigger samples of my kick and snare. So that it sounded like my kit, but perfectly on beat to the original song. But then the hi-hat, I played that on my drum set, my drum kit. I remember having a really hard time remembering how to play them, so I actually printed out the MIDI notes and put them on a music stand in front of me and kind of played along to almost like to sheet music to remember how to play it. And then all the rest of the song, I ran the MIDI through my keyboard and selected, the right sounds to get the achieved goal. That song was done mostly in the box, what they call. Most of the stuff was playing the MIDI through my keyboard, and then kind of like E1M2, I did the hi-hat and other cymbals, which is sort of like, that's what brings the song to life. It's got the really fast 16th notes on the hi-hat, and then about halfway through, I open it up and I go between the ride and the hi-hat. I played those all for real. The kick and the snare, again, in that song, I did with the MIDI triggering my samples of my kit. So I never realized that song sounds just like Ry's from Pantera. I was a huge Pantera fan, and I'm actually really glad that when I was remaking these songs, I didn't hear Pantera in my head when I was playing the guitar and the drums and remaking that song, because it probably would have leaked into what I was doing. I just heard it as it was for the Doom song.
And that track title is Kitchen Ace, which was inspired by Pantera. One of my favorite aspects of playing through that map was actually your use of pitch harmonics, also known as guitar squealies. I love playing that. Every time I know it's coming for a guitar squealy, I'm just doing a little air guitar.
Yeah, so the air raid siren, just like any good musician, that idea came to me in the shower. I found a sample online and just threw it in there, and to this day I go on YouTube and find comments about that song, and people are just saying, man, that siren just gives it such a cool sound. Originally, I was going to try playing all that on my keyboard, and I figured it out, tried recording, and I couldn't get it perfectly on beat. So I recorded the MIDI notes from my keyboard, and then I started lining them up to the grid in my project. And after probably half an hour, I thought, why am I even doing this? I might as well just use the original MIDI. It's all there. So that song ended up being mostly another in-the-box song where all of the keyboards, all of the synths, it's all played from MIDI to my keyboard, and then I'm recording the audio from the keyboard back into the computer. I wanted to bring at least one more element of played by hand kind of feel, so I came up with a guitar part to play during it. And I think it adds a lot to the song, and it makes it feel a little bit more organic. So the original, it had this chord that I ended up figuring out on the guitar, but I had to really stretch my hand, and I had to pull the guitar like way up, and I hit it once and let it ring out, and then I took the same audio and reversed it so it goes bang and fades back in at the crescendo. I remember just being really happy with that. That couldn't have turned out better. The other thing is the original song has a drum fill. Being a somewhat drummer, I felt like I could do something cooler. So I sat there on the drums and just played and came up with something that I thought I could make work. And I hit record, ran out to the drum set, and played it in one shot. And I thought, my God, I can't do any better than that. Another cool thing about this song is when Blaster was making the level for E1M6, I had already had this song at least like in a beta stage, and he told me that he put the song on repeat. And one of the coolest parts of E1M6 that he remade was in the original, there's like this maze section. In the original, it's sort of like a sewer, but he decided to take it a totally different direction and he made it like a hellscape, and it just made that level something extra. And he told me that when he was making that hell section, he just had my song on repeat. And that was just so cool to hear. So in my first draft of that song, I found a sawtooth lead that sounded really similar to the original, and it sounded awful. I uploaded it and asked the guys what they thought. They hated it too. So I decided I'm just going to take it in a different direction, and I switched it to piano. The other aspect of the song is it had this snare going the whole time, which I also used my snare sample and used the original MIDI to trigger my sample. When you combine that snare taps with the piano, it suddenly took on this military kind of feel. It was probably my least favorite in the original game, and it at least made it fit with the rest of the songs a little bit more, and it made it a little more memorable for me, changing it to the piano.
Late in 2005, Brian Gosher, aka Thump Monk, messaged Sonic, asking if he could help in any way. Sonic listened to some of Thump Monk's work and was blown away by the quality. The one song Sonic had struggled to breathe life into was E1M9. He had started recording a version, but he was very unhappy with how it sounded. The other guys on the team felt the same, so he asked Thump if he would be willing to do it instead. Thump said yes, and Clang couldn't have been happier. When he heard Brian's E1M9, he was afraid he had been shown up.
First thing I had to do was listen to it, because I didn't have, obviously, the levels memorized by music other than E1M1. Everybody knows how that one starts, but I didn't really know which one. So I went and found it. And so as soon as it played, I was like, oh, this is the secret bass. This is okay, I know this. I thought, like, I'm just going to tune the guitar to a power chord and tune it down a little bit. I listened to the drums that were in E1M9, and I was like, there's certain parts in this that sound like a mosh part. Having a tempo change in the middle of it, or really just a time change in it, is moving away from that MIDI sound. I was like, if this was me, if this was a band and I had to play it live and I wanted to see like sneakers in the air and kids flying and all the kind of stuff I saw when I was in a punk band, this would need to have tempo changes in it. So you're in a space station or you're in a giant facility. And so I started adding some of these cool little blippy synths and stuff like that, because I really wanted to nod to the fact that Doom was always a space game. You know, and it was always you're always in these technological environments.
Thump Monk also offered to do the music for the intro cinematic, which turned out great and was more along the lines of what he was used to doing. The one song Sonic took big artistic liberties on was E1M8, otherwise known as Sign of Evil. He had left this one until the end because he wanted to use all that he had learned recording all of the other songs to make this one the best it could be.
The door opens, and then your ears are just blessed with this awesome guitar, this slow, elegant, yet brutal guitar, and then you see all these pinkies there surrounded by these barrels, and you just let a shotgun fire, the whole room blows up. Aside from playing it, I remember going on YouTube many years later, and people are still commenting on it. It's a track that I will actively seek out just to listen to for no reason whatsoever. Like, I'll be driving in my vehicle and I'll pull over and I'll be like, I'm gonna quick pull this up on YouTube. I would just hit play and then just repeat and then just keep driving. And I drive a lot for work. If it was a cassette tape, I would have wore it out. No question. No question. You're hearing that music, and you know what's coming if you played Doom before, but you don't know how good the music's going to be. It's almost like a gaming crescendo. Like you know something badass is going to happen, but everything's just still on edge, and you're just waiting for it to break. Everything else was already a 10 for this map. The music doesn't even turn it up to 11. It's at like 21.
Besides E1M1, which obviously rocks and it's iconic, this song always touched me the most. That lead that it plays is just haunting. When it came to remaking the song, I wanted it to drive a little bit more. I actually started out on my drums with going a totally different direction, which I think I recorded it and I hit undo as soon as I listened to it, and then I had to walk away for a couple of days and rethink my direction. When I came back to it after a couple of days, I just picked up my guitar. I think I started out by just jamming the rhythm guitar and along to the original song. I'm just trying to spark some ideas, and that's where I came up with what the rhythm guitar does. That informed where I wanted the rest of the song to go. From there, I figured out the lead guitar, which is really soulful and just heart-wrenching. It almost hurts, It hurts in a good way listening to that lead guitar. And then it just hit me one day. I could have the song open with that melody, that lead guitar single melody, and then bring in the rest of the band. And that's really where it just started rolling from there. And then the ending, I was really into Dream Theater at the time. Their Octavarium album had just come out, and one of the songs ended with these long doom, really long drawn out notes at the end. And I will say I kind of went for that feel. In my own Sonic Clang metal way, I went for that sort of sound. So yeah, in the end, that song, I probably took the most amount of time on E1M8 out of all of them. It's my absolute favorite song in the mod. If I were to remake any of these songs again now, that's the one song that I would remake.
At the very beginning, when you come down and then you see the exploding barrels, it was just when you put the music in, it all came together, and you heard that riff kind of twang off, and you're just like, oh my god, this is amazing. As I was going through the level, when I got to the point where I've put that teleporter in, and I've taken the classic Doom 3 portal effect with the flesh tunnel that you kind of see to be teleporting through, I was thinking about, well, we can't have open spaces in this engine like you could rudimentarily in the Doom engine, where you had the open area when the whole walls drop down and you've got the star shape around and it's all open. And it's like, well, you can't really do that in the Doom 3 engine. And in the end, I was like, well, we'll just accept that we can't do it and find another way. So then I made it really dark and made it so the Hell Knights, instead of coming out of those kind of weird box things in the original game, make it a bit more an event. So it's like they're coming out almost like cryostasis type thing coming out of the ground, and then the glass spins drop and they come out to make it more of an event. Particularly because by that point we knew we weren't going to continue after the shareware, right? So I wanted to make it a bit more of a thing. There were bits and pieces that I consciously did as I was going through that I wanted to put in a level, but a lot of it just came together again because we spent so much time getting that sense of feeling consistency through the levels and so on. As a level to build, it was quite easy to do because we had the blueprints from all of the other levels on how to put these different components together. I knew that I wanted to do something a bit more grand in that you come down, the barrels blow up, you come down the steps and you go into that room. It's just a simple, a cross section. In the original game, it's quite bland, really. It's just a hallway with two rooms either side of it. So I knew I wanted to make that hallway at least a bit more impactful. So again, that's why I kind of made it to be a mesh floor with the drops and gap underneath, so you could see it was actually 3D, if that makes sense, for the detail. So yeah, so E1M8, it just came together.
That was basically just there for QA testing, so that you could go through the level and you're like, oh, when I'm standing right here and I'm looking in this direction, I see a problem in the level geometry. So you hit that key and it records like what your position is and what your orientation in the game world is. And you could just write all of those out to a file. And then there was another command that would let you load that file and sort of like go through report 1, report 2, report 3, which is super helpful if you're, the QA person. You're just playing through and noting, like, you don't want to have to write down like, okay, well, you have to go into the room like this and do this and that and the other thing. It's like you just want to be where the issue is. And then on the designer side, you don't want to replicate the set of steps that's been written out. You just want to kind of go and see the problem for yourself. And I remember that was around the time that I was still, before I had officially joined the team, I was still beta testing. And I remember thinking like, oh, this is going to make my bug reports like so good. And I don't know if anybody even ever used it.
I think the last major contribution I made was the player character model. It wasn't needed for anything first person. It was only really there to facilitate that intro cutscene. I had to have that finished before that could be done. Man, I was still a first year student when I made that. I can't believe that I thought, I can take on the task of next genning the Doom guy.
I was very eager to get involved in this, and I wanted to do something really, really cool, and like I was overthinking it big time. Like I wanted to have this like very dynamic, like artsy fartsy sort of design for the main menu. And the other team members sort of gently talked me back off of that edge and said like, hey, it's a menu, like don't overthink it. It should be like new game, load game options.
There was, when I was building the cage in the middle, I hadn't really used, I'd used patches for curved surfaces, but I hadn't used it for rock formations and things like that. So in E1M9 I used that as an opportunity to learn how to do that a bit more effectively. So if you go into that cage room, I do remember specifically putting in a grate and then behind it putting a bumpy rock surface behind it. I started playing a bit more and being a bit more experimental with using patches to put decals on floors and things. I think that the underground tunnel secret in that, even now I'm not entirely happy with it, because if I hadn't used patches to do it, I just used brushes, and if you go in it looks fine, it does the job. You've got the secret there, you get your stuff, you've got lifts that I'm happy with. But the actual rock surfaces in that tunnel itself look quite amateurish now, in hindsight. I think it was the first time I actually looked at using the Doom 3 script properly as well, rather than just using it for lifts and rudimentary. In one of the rooms you go in, you pick the key, all the lights go off, and then the doors shut and the monsters spawn in. And that was obviously, you had to use the Doom 3 script language, if you want to call it that. So you had to add multiple triggers all going off. I mean, I look at it now, it's really simplistic, but back then to me, I hadn't done any of it before, so it was all new. One of the challenges I remember on the last secret, you go into the final room where the exit is, and there's a secret as you go in on the right hand side. In the original Doom, they're all on upper platforms, and to get across them you run across the top of them to pick up the different things, and you've got to sprint to pick them up. I remember that room being quite challenging to do, because I was like, how do I get this working? And I did it differently to the original secret, so it was all up on the sky and you went around the platform. And it was narrow, and you had to walk around a platform to get the stuff. So it was done differently, but it was in the spirit of the original, if that makes sense. So there was a few bits and pieces like that I remember having challenges with. There's the E1M4 I remember the most about, probably because I did it twice, as I said. E1M8 and E1M9, they were just, I've got to get them done. E1M4's got a bit of more of a closer place in my heart, if I want to be cheesy and put it that way.
All of the pieces were coming together. As December drew nearer, the team put the finishing touches on the mod. The levels were complete, the music was mastered, the intro and outro cinematics were finalized, and the new menu was fully implemented. It was time to release version 1.0.
Coming into the mod, it was just like, God, that brings back memories. And they took all the modern Doom 3 assets and just recreated all the levels. It felt totally genuine. I was like, I remember this map. I remember this, but it had like the Doom 3 textures and stuff.
Classic Doom 3 was an eye-opener of what really went into game development.
What was interesting is I remember like seeing forum posts somewhere, somebody had redone all the classic music from Doom, and they were available as MP3, so I like downloaded the soundtrack.
Most of my posts were like, this is awesome! This is awesome, guys!
This was such a faithful recreation, but the sounds, everything had the aggression, the bite. I loved the whole production. It blew me away at the time. I was just like, yes!
When Classic Doom 3 was in development in the early stages, Like I was full ham on it. I was all over it.
In February, the team was awarded the honor of being Mod of the Month on moddb.com. The work wasn't always easy, but this ragtag group of volunteers from around the world had done it. They defied the odds and finished what they started. Over the course of the next 7 months, a few guys stuck around the developer forum to work on bug fixes that were reported after the 1.0 release. In July 2006, they released version 1.1.
When the 1.3.1 patch of Doom 3 came out, it broke the classic Doom 1.1.
So then when 1.1, it was just kind of we've had this feedback, we just got to make these fixes, so we've got to leave it in a stable state. And I remember Snoop Jedi just did it. You know, he just did 1.2 and he just did it and it worked.
I definitely took it upon myself. Like, I don't think I solicited too much, like, hey, like, I need input from everybody else, because none of the assets were going to change or anything. It's just people who had the new version of Doom 3 were going to want to play the mod.
I was like, yeah, cool. Yeah, just quickly make this fix and release it so it's compatible with the Steam release with 1.3.1. Hence why it's the final version is the same patch number as the final patch that was released by id Software.
I knew that, and I was kind of like, well, I'll just try to make sure that there's an updated version out there for those players.
It was like, oh, great, cool, well done. So I packaged it up and re-released it. And that was about it, really. It was just the needs at the time. I wanted people to still carry on playing it. So we just released what we needed to just to make it work, and that was it, really.
You have this one game that came out in 1993 and just completely took the world by storm, and it's so deep-rooted. Like, even meeting people now that are approximately my age, like, hearing their stories about how they first started playing Doom and where they are now it's neat.
I'm eagerly anticipating Doom coming out, and I keep looking for somebody who wants to do the original levels. I stumble across, somehow, you guys, after enough searches on some board, this Cdoom project, and I was like, that'll do.
At the time, after the mod came out, like, everyone I knew who was into gaming knew about it and loved it.
It's been weird, actually, talking to people in the years since. Whenever I mention it, it kind of gets a better reaction than a lot of the stuff that I've worked on professionally.
Doom 3, it felt more like a survival horror game because they were trying to get you to slow down. Everything felt more claustrophobic than the original, so it just didn't have the same feel. So when I installed that Doom mod, the classic mod, it just totally brought back all the feels of the original one.
I do kind of feel like, in some way, it was part of an end of an era in modding.
There's no company other than id that can take the credit for letting fans take control of the game. That's the company that said, you know what, go for it. Do it. Do what you're going to do with it. And so I would say it's the id culture that led me to you, because I knew someone would do it.
What a just magical time, at least in my life. But I feel like everybody who was part of the Doom 3, the extended Doom 3 community, especially, I would hope that the classic Doom 3 community has fond memories in the same way that I do.
I checked back YouTube comments for the mod, and people are still talking about it, even to this day.
Just based on the number of people that were coming to our forums, they didn't just want to play it, but they wanted to sign up on our forums and talk to us.
I think it gave me a really skewed expectation of what it was like to work on a team. It's not a given that a project gets completed, right? And it was a pretty, like, I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back now, just how sort of rare an occurrence it was to have a team that was so committed to finishing what they started.
I think the fact that the mod finished and we released on time, it's because of Gaz. He held that team together. He threw the project up on his back and carried it across the finish line.
I just think it's amazing that people, like we just saw last week, FP was it, on YouTube, did a playthrough. People still see it as being relevant, you know. People are still playing this thing that we created all these years ago.
I probably could have made that a short answer.
Oh my god.
I love it.
Yeah, right, yeah, this is...
My god.
This is surreal, man, seriously. Are you filming it as well?
Yeah, I am, yeah.
Oh man, yeah. Well, I'm all the way here and thinking like, what? Just shy of the best part of 20 years, isn't it? Yeah. Oh my god, it's cool. You know, so I was a bit confused about whether I'm in the right place. Then I saw one of the ferries coming. I was like, it's got to be the right place. So I went to the waterfront, I took that photo, and you went, no, that's not us. Oh no, man.
Thank you for watching.